Have you heard the news? Just a few minutes ago, there was a massive cyber attack. Evil hackers struck a major company. Or was it a government institution? Maybe a hospital? Well, whatever their target was, the authorities were certain of one thing. Those hackers, well, they were Russian. Anywhere you look, you'll find their trace. Companies, infrastructure, politicians, they hack it all. Nobody can escape them. And nobody can catch them. But how do they hack? Who do they work for? And most importantly, who are they really? To find that out, let's dive into the dark world of Russian hackers. Meet Leonid. He's a 16-year-old from a large Russian city. Leonid spends his mornings at school, although he doesn't like it very much. While there, he yearns to return home to a sprawling suburb where his mom's apartment is. Leonid doesn't go out much, though. He spends most of his time on the computer. He loves games, cars, war movies, and cool music. Leonid also loves his country. He's not into politics, not at all. But he knows one thing. His country is in grave danger. It is, as everybody surely should understand, beset by enemies. Clues about that are everywhere. On TV, on the internet, all over the place. Everything aligns. Everything shows that the whole world is against Russia. The only goal of the entire West is to destroy Leonid's country and its people. Well, at least that's what Leonid reads on the internet and sees on TV. He's absolutely sure that everything bad that ever happened in Russia is the result of foreign conspiracies. Corrupting Western influence is why Leonid's father had problems with alcoholism and had to leave. It's why the economy is stagnating, and the family is barely holding on, even despite the payouts. It's why Leonid no longer has a brother. Not everybody in Leonid's immediate vicinity understands the connection, though, and it frustrates the boy immensely. He wants to act, to do something. Leonid's brother wanted to act too, and join the army. Leonid is neither as brave nor as stupid as that. No, he knows that if you want to defeat Russia's enemies, you have to be smart. And so, when he returns home from school, Leonid becomes somebody else. He becomes the Dark Diver. He's just a cog in a much bigger movement. He knows that. But Leonid learns fast. The crew he belongs to is growing. Just a few months ago, there were a handful of them. Now it's dozens. And together, they can do a lot. Higher-ranking members of Leonid's gang are smart. They follow the news and have a good grasp of what's what. Every few days, they lay out a set of targets and create a plan. The group mostly does DDoS, distributed denial of service. They use a botnet, a collection of infected devices all across the world to send requests and jam the target server, taking it down. The crew's botnet isn't very big, but it's enough for some tasks. Whenever they need something more powerful, they chip in and buy some traffic from a vendor on the dark web. Leonid's crew also probes websites and looks for a chance to deface them, or maybe steal some data. They scrape leaks for credentials and sometimes send out phishing emails. Anything that would allow them to get to the target. On a rare occasion, they infect the computer of their target with ransomware, making it unusable. Their techniques are varied, and so are their targets. But there's one thing that ties those targets together. All of them, every single one, are in the countries Russia considers its enemies. One target may be an institution of some European country whose leadership said something bad about Russia. Another one may be some American company, because, of course, America's the main enemy of Russia. Every other day, the target is in Ukraine, because that's just how the world works. Every time they attack Ukraine, Leonid remembers his brother, and thinks about how proud he would be. Leonid considers himself a hacktivist, one of thousands across the country and beyond.
I think if you were to use a sports analogy, hacktivists are sort of your minor league players. They are often students or grad students or recent graduates who are trying to make a name for themselves. They're trying to distinguish themselves with bold attacks, usually idealistic, nationalistic driven individuals with an agenda.
Hacktivists used to be independent, so they used to be something like an individual groups that work on behalf of their leaders, of their teams, of their, I don't know, maybe their beliefs, let's call it this way, in what they wanted to achieve. The most famous one being Killnet, Zarya, something like Anonymous Russia that's been on the news lately. Again, why speaking about news? Because that's what they aim. They want to, pop up, to be noticed, to people to talk about their activity.
Chances are, if you've heard about some prominent and annoying cyber attack recently, Leonid's group was responsible for it. Not because the attack itself was damaging, but because the group found a way to spin it. They chose a target that would be easily noticeable, something you couldn't just ignore. Then they attacked it using the easiest way possible. Whether the attack succeeded or not, they posted about it on their social media. The post exaggerated the whole story a bit, or maybe quite a lot. But who's going to check anyway? In the blink of an eye, the story was picked up by every other hacktivist group, spreading it farther and farther. Eventually, influencers, news accounts, all kinds of people began sharing it. Before long, the news about the attack reached papers and TV channels, and now everybody has heard of the operation Leonid's gang pulled off. By that time, the effects of the attack have probably been mitigated, but that's not the point. The publicity, the buzz, the sense that their targets are vulnerable and the gang can do everything, that's the intention. The end goal of Leonid's operation is to cause as much arbitrary damage as possible, to be the agents of chaos who see doubt, anger, and mistrust in everything they touch. In Leonid's mind, that's the only way to fight the enemy, who's as strong as the one they are fighting, the West, as in the entirety of it. All the governments, companies, and people that belong to this nebulous and ever-changing group. Because if you're in Russia, every bit of information you get points to one thing. They are responsible for the woes of the Russian people. Leonid hates the West with the entirety of his heart and directs his angst to these long nights in front of the computer. They give his life meaning, and he can't imagine things any other way. In a sense, he's addicted to hacking. The feeling it gives him, the thrills, the satisfaction, the rush of adrenaline when something large crashes and burns. Video games can't provide this kind of joy, and real life doesn't even come close. Leonid never felt this kind of camaraderie with his school buddies, and he no longer has friends beyond other hackers in the gang. As the boy dons his alter ego, he is no longer alone. He's no longer in a crumbling apartment block on the outskirts of the city. He's in a tribe, a team, a community that strives to change the world for the better, one downed American website, one interrupted European service, one jammed Ukrainian server at a time. So far, Leonid never considered earning money for his hacking endeavors. But one day, if it all goes well, that may happen. At least, there are people who manage to pull it off. This is Peter. He lives in the same apartment block as Leonid, although they don't really know each other. Peter is in his 30s. He doesn't work anywhere, at least officially. Well, he tried many times, but that didn't last. Being a desk drone drove Peter mad, so he quit even before Russia's IT market disintegrated. An office job also didn't really meet Peter's financial needs. Peter is not very good with money. He loves nice things, maybe a bit too much. Who can blame him? Back in school, Peter's teacher always said that he's smart, but lazy. But when something interests Peter, he can be the most hard-working person in the world. Having nice things interests Peter a lot, and so he found a job that can fulfill his needs and give him an outlet to his talents. Peter began hacking. Not real hacking, at least not how some of Peter's superiors see it. More like hacking by proxy. So the job is simple, convincing as many people as possible to download a small file. Peter does that by collecting leaked credentials, emails, nicknames, passwords. He then stuffs them into login pages of social media accounts, looking for matches. In an unlikely chance of success, the password works, and Peter adds the unlocked account to his loyal army of robots. Those robots then do his bidding, contacting the entirety of their friend list with a simple message bearing a small attachment. Most of this process is automated, and Peter has only a vague understanding of how it works, but even that understanding is more than enough. The file Peter sends out is malicious. It's also so well designed that a child could use it. Peter pays a small fee for access to that file.
It's easy, fast. It's like a franchise now. So you can buy a ransomware for a day or for a week, get rich, that's what they think, and, leave to another country with full bags of money. But yeah, that's nothing that happens in the real world now.
As soon as Peter joined the gang a few years ago, he immediately got lucky. A few successful jobs in a row allowed him to get all the things he wanted. For a while, he was living like a king. His success ended quite soon though, and Peter kept chasing that high ever since. Successful attacks still happen. Peter can't complain. At least it's better than trying to find a real job. Also, he got lucky once, so who says it can't happen again?
These ransomware kind of attacks allow well-educated individuals to make a lot of money very, very quickly. With all of the sanctions that have taken place within Russia since the invasion of the Ukraine, it has created even less economic opportunity. And I think the government in Russia has become even more tolerant or even supportive of ransomware groups, because all of these groups are bringing money into the Russian economy.
Law enforcement was never interested in how ransomware operators earn their income. Peter is pretty sure the police are well aware of what he does, but they just don't care about that. There's only one thing that could bother them, and that's Peter crossing the line. A part of Peter's job is to know who his targets are. And it's an important part. Anybody who lives in Russia and friendly countries is off limits. Larger Russian companies are so far behind the red line that it's almost as if they don't exist. Thankfully, most of this process is automated too. The malware detects the language settings of the victim's device and doesn't activate if Russian is selected. However, if the target from Russia gets infected anyway, Peter might be in trouble. The bosses then dispatch a team of real hackers, get in touch with the target, and sort out the problem. This happened to Peter's victim once. He got a sizable penalty and doesn't want the story to repeat. It's pretty well known what happens to habitual line crossers, people who attack forbidden targets despite the rules. In the best cases, they lose their business and have no chance of joining any gang. Particularly annoying ones get visited by local thugs in the real world. And if a hacker crosses the line one too many times, if he really steps on the toes of people who shouldn't be touched, he gets the worst punishment of all: the law. Peter doesn't know anyone who's been arrested, but he's seen some of them on the news, and the prospect of getting paraded in front of the whole country in handcuffs doesn't look very enticing. As far as Peter understands, it's not politics. It's much simpler than that. You don't attack your own family, and if you do, well, you only have yourself to blame. So Peter picks his targets carefully. People in the West are much richer anyway, so why even bother with Russian targets?
The ransomware groups grew out of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And I think that the rampant inflation and the privatization of industries left a lot of very highly educated people without a means of making an income. And they turned to these types of attacks for economic advantage.
While quite new to the whole ransomware game, Peter considered himself a hacker for a long time. He got his first computer back in the 90s and quickly learned that you don't have to pay money for things like video games if you're clever enough. It was a different time, a wild time. Back then, Peter couldn't even imagine that hacking can be as profitable a business as it is now. Well, at least to some. Everybody knows hackers who earn millions without breaking a sweat. Someday, after some successful attack, Peter might become one of those too. Just one good job to buy a new car, maybe a new flat in a nicer part of town, or maybe, if things turn out really well, Just leave everything and get away from it all. To Dubai, Istanbul, even Europe. One good job. Peter likes to sit like that and think about all the nice things he'll get after hitting a jackpot. But now, he's just noticed that he's all out of cigarettes. On his way down to the shop, Peter passes the door of a neighbor he's never seen. The door's always closed. Peter doesn't know it, but if he ever messes up at work really, really bad, he might get a chance at finally meeting the man who lives there. The next chapter's loading, so you can still hit that subscribe button while we have time. Okay, almost over now. Peter's neighbor is Andrei. Right now he's at work. Andrei leaves early and comes back late. He's divorced, in his early 40s, and doesn't have friends. He wouldn't have time for them anyway. Andrei finished university at the top of his class, computer engineering. While studying, he didn't even think about joining the military. But one day his class was visited by a recruiter who offered a very enticing offer. Andrei is quite good at finding vulnerabilities in computer systems. There's a need for people with this skill, the recruiter said. If Andrei wants to earn a passable income, he can join some local tech company and spend the rest of his life slaving away at a desk job, always overworked and always on the verge of getting fired. Or he could work for the government. The recruiter was one from the GRU, the military intelligence of the Russian armed forces. It responds directly to the general staff, the very top of the Russian military. Its members aren't your regular soldiers. They're an elite, the very best Russia has to offer. Andrei joined and never looked back. Right now, he's in a grand building in the center of the city, by a desk where he spends most of his time. The environment isn't dynamic, but after a decade and a half, Andrei got used to that. He likes it. The predictability, the discipline, the order. He even got used to the uniform, which seemed like overkill at first. The work itself is hard, but satisfying. You have to learn and adapt. There are lots of challenges, but that's the cost of being at the top of the game. Andrei does not just hack things. He does that on a level only a handful of people in the world ever reach, and his targets reflect that. Sometimes Andrei's unit attacks foreign governments. They infiltrate agencies, parties, the very lives of world-famous politicians. Sometimes they attack foreign companies, typically those in the defense or cybersecurity business. But the most satisfying results come from breaching infrastructure, breaking into power plants, factories, industrial control networks. Andrei is in awe of it, the power he feels when he holds the lives of thousands of people in his hands. One press of a button, and they're gone. A mass tragedy, a world war. A lot rests on one click. Andrei is addicted to that feeling, and there's nothing he would agree to exchange for moments like these.
In particular, I think that targeting critical infrastructure, targeting OT, SCADA devices, that's where it all began. And that's what we see now. A lot of companies in the US, for example, at the moment are being targeted, especially the ones that do water supplies.
Of course, everything Andrei does is strictly supervised. His agency isn't after death and destruction. What the superiors really need are military and trade secrets. When necessary, they inflict just enough damage to show that the team was there. No more, no less. GRU is just one of many Russian institutions that do this kind of job. There's the FSB, the Federal Security Service. Andrei never met their hackers, but people say they're smug and undisciplined. Many of them aren't even officers. There's the SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service. Andrei collaborated with them once or twice. They're competent, but most of their work involves informational attacks, political espionage, and such. Useless tasks, in Andrei's opinion. And of course, there are the civilians. Thousands upon thousands of them. They're difficult to control, more of a mob than an army. Some of them hack for political reasons. Others seek financial gain. In addition to hacking, Andrei's unit also controls and orchestrates the civilian attacks, picks and clears targets, draws lines, and punishes the misbehaving hackers.
I might assume that a lot of hacktivists now, especially in Russia, they're under government control. That's why I was saying about them targeting the same goals. So they might be achieving something like an order or something like a target they need to hit, and they are doing this one by one.
Of course, you wouldn't pick a hacktivist or even a ransomware operator to do a real hacker's job. They won't be able to infiltrate a defense contractor or break into an email server of a political party. That's the work of Andrei and his colleagues. But even a disorganized mob of script kiddies still has its uses.
But again, if we try to remember that there is a different goal for different security operations, then you understand that some operations are being designed just to showcase that they've been done, that they were implemented, that the goal was achieved, and others are staying undercover. The other reason might be something like, when a magician does his trick, he usually shows something in front, but the real action is done on the background. So that might be also a trick. So when you try to focus attention of cybersecurity authorities, let's say in US, into water supply grid, at the same time you might be targeting something else. So you put their attention in the other spot just to make sure that you do all the action, all the important action in quite other direction.
Andrei isn't too pleased with civilian hackers, but he understands that they're a valuable asset for the country. They provide cannon fodder, a cheap way to conduct a lot of attacks, or in the worst case, at least a distraction. They're also the future. The kids among them will grow up one day, get bored of hacking for fun. They'll want a better life and a real purpose to work for. Andrei used to be just like them back in the day. In his teenage years, before he was a hacker, he frequented the same forums as Peter, and unbeknownst to anybody, a lot of that very convenient software Peter uses draws roots from things Andrei wrote in his youth. It was malware, quick and dirty exploits to be dropped on the dark web for all to use. But Andrei's first love was cracking. Games at first, then work programs, then industrial software that could be sold to Russian businesses and provide teenage Andrei with enough money to sustain his hacking hobby.
The percentage of software that is cracked or not properly licensed in Russia is, and I would say it's in excess of 90% if you get into the very sophisticated tools that are used for designing electronics and mechanical engineering and chemical engineering and these types of applications. I think a lot of these things are now embargoed, so you cannot even purchase legitimate copies of these kind of design tools today, so it's almost forced piracy. But even before the sanctions went into effect, Russian industry ran off of unlicensed or cracked kind of software.
But besides money, there was one more thing that this kind of activity provided: power. The first time Andrei felt it, he was still a teenager, hooked on the internet through a landline in his parents' flat. He remembers looking at the wire, a line of metal encased in transparent plastic, pondering how so much can be done through such a thin connection. The whole world could fit through there and bend to his will with just a handful of clever math tricks. It was a sense of power Andrei never found anywhere else, and he hasn't been able to let go of it ever since. Sure, the 90s in Russia were full of chaos and poverty, but Andrei remembers the hacker scene of that time very fondly. The decade was full of opportunity. It hooked Andrei on hacking and instilled in him a sense of purpose. It's that feeling that brought him to the GRU and gave him the life he has now. The 90s brought up an entire generation of hackers who had skills and motivation, who could do so much with so few resources. If things went differently, those people would be the backbone of a strong IT industry. Maybe in some other alternative world, Russia is the cybersecurity powerhouse with the most skilled ethical hackers you could find. In that world, Andrei is probably heading a prominent cybersecurity company. Leonid is participating in hacking competitions and honing his skills before becoming a well-known researcher. And Peter works with customers helping them solve their problems instead of creating ones. But that alternative world does not exist. This reality is all we have, and in it, Russia has no place for ethical hackers. The easiest path for curious and skilled people is the path of cybercrime. It's the only way for them to satisfy their addiction. An addiction the path both creates and feeds, because the Russian state itself is addicted to cybercrime too. It's an integral part of its foreign policy, economy, and life. A quick high instead of the slow and painful process of development. Just like any addiction, it's a vicious cycle, and there's no indication that it's going to stop. Or maybe there is. All the characters depicted in this video are fictional. We created them by combining everything we know about the Russian hacker world into a few easily understandable bits. But behind these characters are real people with real lives. The real Russian hackers. They are people who have their own motivations for what they do, and who spread fear and misery with a clear and deliberate intention. And behind those people is a state for which conducting cybercrime is an official way of doing things. Crashing websites, pushing ransomware, spreading disinformation, and advancing its agenda in any way possible. That's how Russian foreign policy works. We know quite a lot about the inside life of the Russian hacking scene. There are insider reports, whistleblowers, people who infiltrated and researched that world. And while we don't know a lot about what happens at the very top of it, we can infer the intentions of the people who are in charge. However, there is one question which remains open. Can Russia get rid of its addiction to cybercrime? Is it not too late to change? Maybe start investing time and resources into becoming a productive technology hub and let go of the high that ultimately gets you nowhere. Well, not doing anything about that is easier, that's for sure. But is the country, and most importantly, the people in it, better that way? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.